To what extent do you believe the town of Erie needs to embrace green technology and sustainability? Do you have a plan for how our town can be more open and supportive of green technologies in the future?
So I really like this question because I think it is really important to note that as much as this issue is portrayed as being partisan, it's actually not. I think green energy is something that we all agree is something we need to be working towards, but we also need to realize there is no silver bullet when it comes to energy. Green energy has its own faults as well. Look at the mining operations that is required for the batteries. There's a lot of pollution there. There's a lot of child labor. You know, nothing is perfect. But I think what really matters right now is that we're working towards it, and while we're doing that, we maintain diversity in our energy options. I think that our town should definitely be investing in that path, but again, with the understanding that there's still a ways to go, right? When the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, they're not doing a whole lot for you, and then even when they are, how are we storing that energy effectively? Are we using batteries that are bad for the environment too? You know, again, these are things that we all need to work on together. We should be working in that direction. The town should be supportive of it, but we also need energy diversity.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with some of what he was just saying. There's a lot of benefit to green technologies, and I'm glad to see those things rolling out. A lot of people have embraced those on their own decision. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that when we see that there's a good thing, that we want to impose it on everybody. And it's not the town government's role to be doing that imposition. And where it runs into a problem is if we're dictating to developers exactly what they can and cannot do, think about things like going 100% gas-free in homes, it raises the costs for the residents. And we're already looking at an affordability issue with housing. So if we're dictating a lot of requirements to the developers for these kinds of things, it makes the housing prices even higher. So we end up with an additional problem. Thanks.
As you can tell by the number of Teslas driving around Erie, people are interested in green technology. You have a hard time finding which one is yours, I'm sure, if you drive one. And I believe that some of the initiatives that we've had in town, whether there be initiatives to try to find solar centers in town for us to maybe offset some of the consumption that we ourselves utilize, for example, at the Erie Community Center, or whether it's working with Excel Energy to maybe take over some of the street lights that we have in town to replace them with LED lights that are a lot less burdensome, or whether it's some of the advancements that we've made at the Erie Recycling Center. If you notice, there's a new compactor so that you can drop off a lot more cardboard without us having to be full up and reject loads. So we're making strides in that area. When it comes to green energy itself, I noticed that the oil field service workers that I know in town, they don't work in the oil fields in Erie. They work very far away from town. So finding ways for them to engage in some of the new technologies that may be local, that may be benefiting them directly.
As the board liaison to the Sustainability Advisory Board for the last 4 years, it's been my privilege to execute on the Sustainability Master Plan. By merely adopting the 2021 building codes, we will make great progress toward green technologies, whether it's making homes solar ready, whether it's having electric vehicle charging stations inside your garage, whether it's doing community or utility scale solar installations in town. We have an incredible sustainability department. We have an incredible lead in Tyler Kessler. The members of the Sustainability Advisory Board are amazing, and it's my privilege and honor to have worked with them and to continue bringing forward those projects. The one I'd really like to mention is the Wee Cottages at Erie Commons is the first fossil fuel free development in Erie. Not because we told them to do it, but because it's cheaper. It was cheaper for that developer to omit natural gas lines to each one of those homes. And it'll be cheaper for those residents in the long term. Amazing output. It's a wonderful outcome.
So we have a number of initiatives that the town has moved forward on. Some have been small, some have been very large initiatives. Some have been initiatives that haven't been said to be initiatives, but really were initiatives. We have a lot of EV charging stations around town. They cost the town money to put those in. And anytime you go by them, they're not being used. The reason is because individuals have them inside of their homes because we have a very high median household income here in Erie. So they can afford to actually put one inside of their house, meaning the town-sponsored and paid-for items aren't being used. So really the question becomes, at what cost? Another thing that the town has done is water conservation. In the spirit of water conservation, they re-rated the water rates. They made it so that they were de-incentivizing individuals from using water. What has that done? It has made it so that all of our residents here in town are effectively paying a higher rate than they used to be. Even though in the spirit it was to reduce it, they made all of us have the burden of the consequences placed on our shoulders.
Hello, it's on. Okay. I do support the town's green energy efforts. I'm encouraged by things like the turbine at the water treatment center that generates power for that building. Things like the proposed floating solar array at the wastewater treatment facility that we just upgraded the infrastructure on. These are ways to bring more power into town and make them sort of self-sustaining. I also am encouraged by things like our turf replacement program that we have going on in town right now, where residents can qualify for up to $2,000 for replacing water-thirsty turf in their yards. I think it's important, and something that the town can do to support our own efforts is to make sure that our ordinances reflect our priorities. Right now, our municipal code says that we require 75% of our front yards to be live plants. That's not reflective of that intention to replace your turf. So there are some simple things we can do and some really well thought out things we can do with some good planning.
Out knocking on doors last week reminded me of two things. We got a lot of wind and a lot of sun. I'm going to stretch the term technology a little bit and talk about RTD, because a lot of us here in this room pay RTD taxes. And what do we have to show for it? 2 bus stops on one route. And RTD can be a very green option, especially if we get light rail. I would love to see light rail come up to Erie Gateway out on the I-25. But even buses, gas-powered, diesel-powered buses, 4 or 5 people on a bus is better than 4 or 5 people driving their own car. And that also reduces traffic. So I consider that to be very, very green. The transition to green power or green technology is not going to be overnight. And so we have to start somewhere. We've started with EV stations, and we can hit RTD as well.
I think it's important to remember Erie is a small town, so I think we can try to do our part, but let's remember that this is a much bigger issue than our little town here. So I think at a higher level, I think the capitalist approach is the best route. For example, I myself drive an electric vehicle, and I love it, but I love it also a large part because of the tech and because of the self-driving. So I'm a huge fan of Elon too, by the way. So I like his approach. You make it competitive, you make it cheaper or better in a competitive environment, and then it will take off on its own without the government forcing it or mandating it or requiring it. I think we've seen what happens if the government tries to impose too much into things like this. You see gas prices soaring, we've lost our energy independence. That makes food more expensive, heat more expensive. Everything on earth is now more expensive. So there's an inflation concern to that, and I think especially now we wouldn't want to do anything that would add burden or costs onto our residents and our people that are already struggling with a lot of cost challenges.
Thank you, you all. Next question.